I'm Charles Johnson. As I said, I'm a pastor in Fort Worth, and I'm founder and executive director of an organization called Pastors for Texas Children. We just had our third birthday, so we're fairly new. And our mission before God is to mobilize the faith community for public education, support, and advocacy. I'm grateful to Chairman Aycock for this privilege to address you. Grateful to all of you for listening so carefully. We've had a marvelous exercise in democracy, haven't we? Mm-hmm. And we've heard wonderful viewpoints, diverse viewpoints, very passionately held. And all of you have been exemplars of a listening spirit. It's really amazing to me. Better than a deacon body, I might add. I think my job today, as someone who's certainly not an expert on public education as a minister, is to remind us of the moral foundations of a public trust. We have a public trust before God to educate all our children. And all means all. Not just children who can afford it, not just children whose parents are engaged, but all children. And so the first thing I might say is public education is a moral duty. Education's a basic human right, is it not? When in the old story, when God created the human, God put the human in a garden because every human being gets to eat. And then God brought all the animals to the human to see what the human would name them, because every human being gets to name God's world. It's what my little granddaughter's doing right now. 2 years old. She's naming God's world. She sees a four-legged creature in the pasture. I know that name. Cow. And in a marvelous, mysterious way, a beautiful way, all our children do that. And our public educators receive those children from all backgrounds, all walks of life, all socioeconomic levels, every day, and accepts those children with unconditional love and helps them to name God's world. This is a moral duty, and it's a sacred moral trust. Public education is a democratic duty. Where do our children learn how to be citizens? Friends, with all due respect to some of our friends that we've just heard from, education is not a commodity, and we are not clients, and we are not customers. We are citizens, and we're engaged in a public good, a common good, God's common good. Jana and I have 3 children. They're all grown. Do we say that we don't educate the children of our neighbors that live down the street? No. We happily pay our taxes. Do we say that we don't educate the children living across the tracks? No. We gladly do that. It's in our interest to do that, because this is a democratic duty, and if we're going to have a society, we all invest in that society. And I might just add, with further due respect, it's not my money. This is God's common good. I live in a society. I'm bound together with my neighbor. The world doesn't end with me as an individual. I'm not an autonomous individual. My future is connected to your future, and vice versa. And we live in a community, a society. We have, if you will, a social contract with each other. And part and parcel of that social contract is all our children will be properly educated. Look, y'all, our forefathers settled this a long time ago. This state has settled this a long time ago. By my count, as a Texas Baptist pastor, this is about the 10th or 11th time we have debated a bad policy. And the people of Texas have repudiated it numerous times before, and here we are again. And I would simply ask the question, why? Why are we here again? Deliberating an unproven, failed idea. Public education is a spiritual duty. Now, you probably didn't think you'd ever hear that out of a Baptist preacher. And if I had a dollar bill for every house member who's told me, my goodness, now let me run this by me again. You're a minister for public education? Yes. Because the conventional wisdom is that you only hear from a minister when he's complaining about the public school, some sort of textbook content or some kind of issue. Teachers pursue a calling. They don't do it to make money. This is a spiritual enterprise not given to free market dynamics. It's not governed by cost-benefit analysis or competition any more than a church is, which is why we don't use the term failed schools or failing schools. There's no such thing as a failed school. We have some struggling schools. And I hate to quote Chairman Aycock, he's not here, but you've heard him say it too. I don't know how many struggling schools we have, 80, 90 out of 8,500 perpetually struggling schools. And let's be very, very honest, we know the reasons for those. And it's not because of the quality of the teachers. We're in these schools every day. We're doing a project now in Dallas, Texas. Dr. Hinojosa has identified his 20 high-need schools, the highest need schools, and we're wrapping care of 100 churches around those 20 schools. We're in those schools every day. We see those children well-behaved. We see those teachers sweeping them up with incredible love and attention, our most dedicated teachers. But those children are from neighborhoods that don't have an infrastructure. And to shame and blame them as somehow failed or failing is wrong. One last word. There is no proper authority that this state has to divert public funds toward the establishment of any religious cause. And whatever you call the instrument, a voucher, a tuition tax credit, a education grant, savings grant, opportunity grant, savings account, if this state levies any authority whatsoever to channel those funds toward a homeschool or a religious school, you are violating God's gift of religious liberty.
I have a question.
Allow me to finish, Representative, if I may.
Thank you.
This is God's gift of religious liberty. Jefferson didn't make it up. Madison didn't make it up. And no human judicial body has any proper authority to question it. Since when has God needed Caesar's money to do the Lord's work? Never. Our nation was founded on religious liberty, and we don't need to go down this road now, and that's why the people of Texas have turned back this bad idea numerous times before. Furthermore, if I may, this state has no proper authority before God to tell those church schools what they can say, what they can teach. And now we're deliberating the expansion and the intrusion of this government into those voluntary associations of our church schools? Representatives, I would respectfully ask you to hold the line. If I may say so, I know nothing about the process here, Chairman Aycock, but create some good conversation with your friends down the hall. I know you're trying to do that, Chairman Aycock. And let's see if we can't find what St. Paul calls a more excellent way. Thank you very much.
Question, Representative Bohat.
I certainly do not pretend to be as eloquent as you,
No, you can't.
so I haven't designed my pauses to happen at a certain time. You're a very eloquent speaker.
It's a force of habit of 36 years of preaching.
Sure, I understand. So I won't pretend to be as eloquent as you. But did you know that there are Baptist homes in this state that get Caesar's money to take care of kids? And about the tithe that happens in your church, do you think that we get to deduct the tithe from our IRS taxes?
Well, it was asked me the last time I testified down the hall. No one forces you to pay your tithe, Representative, but universal compulsory education is a trust in this state.
Yep.
Your tithe is voluntary. The government recognizes that deduction as an additional investment in the public good that is producing benefits for society at large, which is why the taxing authority of the federal government allows that deduction. But that shouldn't compromise the value, it seems to me, of universally provided quality education for all 5.5 million of our children.
There are 5 models that deliver public education, Do you favor all 5 of the models that the other gentleman spoke of? Homeschool, charter school, online schools, traditional public?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have pastors in our organization that have church schools. Of course, they're supporting their own church schools. Most of their children go to public schools, even in their own congregations.
Do you think
All you have to do is look at the statistics that bear that out. Our children are going to public schools. A few go to private schools.
Do you think a citizen should be forced, if they're Baptist like me or Baptist like you, do you think they should be forced to go to the Baptist church closest to their home?
Absolutely not. Nor should they be forced to go to the public school. That's where you're going. You have the right to homeschool your children. You have the right to private school your children. You don't have the right to ask the people of Texas to pay for it.
Well, there's 5 models to deliver public education, and we're just going to have to agree to disagree, because do you know what? I'm zoned to go to a failing school. I'm probably the only member of this committee that's zoned to go to a failing elementary school. Do you know how many of you have no right to make me send my child there? And what that allows to happen, if I have the money to send my child to a private school, praise the Lord. But there's lots of people who don't have the money to do that, and but for a tax credit scholarship, they would have the money to send their child. And you don't, no, wait a minute, it's my turn to talk.
Okay.
You don't have the moral right to force somebody to attend a school that they don't desire to go to, even if it's the best school that they're zoned to go to. You don't have that moral right to become the parent, and nor does this committee.
What do you do with that so-called failing school, Representative?
You know what happens? This committee works on it year after year after year after year after year, and just like Kashmir, very little changes. You have to let the parents that do care escape. You have to let the parents that do care about going to a different Baptist church because the other church offers more services to go to the different Baptist church. You have to trust the parents. Just because a few parents can't be trusted, as this gentleman was saying, doesn't mean you can't not trust all parents. That's ridiculous on its face. You have to trust the parents who want a different school alternative for their child, even if they're zoned to go to the best school.
May I respond?
You may.
I appreciate your passion. I've been in church life for a long time. People choose churches for a lot of different reasons. But churches aren't in competition with each other. People choose churches according to deeply personal and spiritual reasons. I served a 6,000-member church in San Antonio, Trinity Baptist. I now serve a 100-member church. It's not because of any dynamic of competition. It's because of a deeply internal spiritual calling and impulse. To answer that,
I would respectfully disagree with you. I would respectfully disagree. Churches are at some level in competition with one another.
Well, let's end that right there. And maybe we can have a good conversation over a cup of coffee about this.
Maybe we can, because Dr. Ed Young, my pastor, would tell you what his product is, what his marketing strategy is, and what it is and what it is not.
Now, your neighborhood school. And I might ask the other members of your colleagues on the committee. Are there not avenues within the public school system, within the proper financial stewardship of our system, for your child to go to another school in our public trust governed by proper oversight and accountability?
Let me give you the answer to that in my situation. The answer is no, because we have caps in place for K through 4th grade. So the answer to your question is no. You let these members up here try to send their kid to the number one performing elementary school like Hunters Creek or Frostwood, there is no room because of the arbitrary caps that this body has put into place with regard to 22-1. So the answer is no. There is likely no room.
Then I would say, if I were in your shoes, I would devise a policy to turn your school around and do what this legislature, with all due respect, fails to do, which is to give your school the resources those children need to succeed. Well, we've already heard we've got a funding crisis. And just because the Senate side says it's not so, doesn't make it so. And we've heard lots of differences of opinion this very day. And we rank about 45th in the country in per pupil spending. And Governor Perry calls us a Texas miracle. We're an economic miracle. We have the will to educate our children, Representative. Do we? We have the means. Do we have the will? That's the question.
Turnaround strategies, sir, with all due respect, take a long time, whether you're in the private sector and you're trying to turn around a corporation, or you're in the public sector and you're trying to turn around a school, or even if you're a small church that's withering on the vine because there's a mega church down the street that's providing more services to meet the demands that you call them, or the unique spiritual inner workings of the individual. So turnaround strategies take a long, long time, and you can't sacrifice those children's to turnaround strategies that take a long time. If it takes 5 to 6 years, that means that child has been trapped in a failing school for 5 or 6 years.
Well, it'd be a novel concept to try it seems to me. Because you go in that school, there's the teacher's aide position. I'm in those schools every day. The teacher's aide position has been cut. The community liaison position has been cut. The librarian's been cut. The art instructor has been cut. The staff has been cut. The census of the children's now 25 instead of 16 like it ought to be. And it's already been said, we put our greenhorn teachers in those schools, oftentimes instead of our best talent. And the truth of the matter is, they still do a good job. And that school can turn around within 2 or 3 years. We see it happening.
Do you know our schools are prettier and our teachers are better educated than they ever have been in the history of the state of Texas?
I'm sorry, would you say that again? Our
teachers are better educated than they ever have been, and our schools are bigger and more beautiful than they ever have been in the history of the state of Texas.
Well, I can't debate that. I don't know if it's true or not.
Of course you can't debate it because you know it's true. You know it's true.
Well, I don't know it's true, Representative. I can only give you my direct testimony.
Well, let me tell you how schoolhouses used to be, like when my parents went to school.
We're in these neighborhoods in South Dallas. We're with these children who have tremendous emotional needs. They don't have the vaunted parental engagement that we've heard about all day long. What do we do with those children? Do we throw them away? Do we deem that school failed? Somehow defective? We double down with love on that school. That's what I would do with your neighborhood school that is
I can tell you my superintendent has tried to double down on love, and it is very, very difficult.
Well,
what I'm saying is you have, not you, but an individual has no moral obligation or right to tell me where I'm required to send my kid to school, even if I'm zoned to go to the very best school. No one has the moral obligation to tell me that.
No, we don't. You have the moral right to educate your children according to the models, the other diverse models that have been explicated this day. You have that right. The state of Texas recognizes that right. But and Chairman Aycock, I have to say this. To privatize this sacred trust by calling it a civil right, and with the ruse that everybody in this room, virtually everybody in this room, knows is incorrect, with the ruse that this money is going to go toward our poorest children. It just is a lie that needs to quit. It's just wrong for numerous reasons that have been outlined. Mr. Ratliff just outlined some. That mother, single mom, loving those babies, holding down 2 jobs, is not going to get up and transport that kid across town to North Fort Worth where the private schools are. And I had a Senate member last session, who'll remain unnamed, call me and ask me to, voted for the voucher bill, call me and ask me to back off our pastors because they were driving him nuts. I said, we're not going to do that. We're just getting started good. He had the gall to tell, and I had this argument with him, that voucher's not going to go to those poor kids. And he said, Pastor, my middle class families making $90,000 and $100,000 sending their kids to private school need some relief. Well, I'm sorry. That's not your proper authority to do so.
We heard testimony about Florida's program, and we could certainly design our program and model it after Florida. You heard the demographic profile that it helps. Are you disagreeing with that demographic profile?
Well, I'm going to leave it up to the experts to debate all this data. You know, data can be shown to prove any point
and here's
you want
my
to
last,
make, which is why I'm not using it.
Here's my last comment. I'm trying to love kids now, both by trying to turn around failing schools and to allow students to choose an option that better works for them. So I'm trying to love them in both ways while we work while we work on turning around the schools.
I've got an idea, Representative. I know your church, great witness. Large congregation, fairly wealthy congregation. I bet your congregation alone could choose that highest need school and turn it around within a year. Wrap your congregational arms of care and love around that highest need school in your neighborhood. There are experts in this room who will help you do that.
Well, I didn't know we were going to end up talking about religion, but let me just defend Second Baptist. We do a lot of work. We do a lot of work across the continent in terms of missionaries. We do a lot of work of helping out the poor. We do a lot of work of helping out orphans. We do a lot of work of helping out women who have no husbands. So there is a tremendous way that we are already serving the community. And with that, I'll end.
Do you have any
Thank you, sir.
questions of the committee?